Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 13 of What If Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the World Eater. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 14 of it, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Naruto woke in his human form to find himself basically encased in bodies. He almost panicked at first, thinking he was tied down to a bed, but calmed down when a female voice groaned tiredly in his ear. Glancing down, he saw that Samui and Yujito were cuddling with each other, using his chest as a pillow. On one side, Tenten hugged his arm to her, his hand resting on her smooth stomach. As her night shirt had been pulled up a little, he could feel her skin pushing against his palm as she breathed deeply. Mei was on his other arm, her long auburn hair splayed over his shoulder as she cuddled with the limb. Shifting on his pillow, another soft moan sounding in his ear. Carefully moving his head, Naruto managed to look up, seeing Kurenai's sleeping face above his, her arms wrapped around his neck. She was acting like a very big pillow, her breasts cushioning his head, while he lay on top of her lower body, her knees pressing against his sides. As much as he would have liked to go back to sleep, he was irrevocably awake and wanted to get up and go about, stretching his wings and breathing the fresh mountain air. He could slip out of their grasp and leave, but he could see from the slight bags under the eyes of faces he could see that they hadn't gotten a full night's sleep. That, and he had fallen asleep entirely alone. Carefully, Naruto took a deep breath and gently blew cold air at Mei, stirring her red locks, and making her shuffle and groan in her sleep. "Mei," he whispered. "Mei, wake up." "Wah?" She mumbled sleepily. "Me trying to sleep in." Another breeze brushed her face, making Mei sit up in surprise, shaking her head to wake herself. "Morning," Naruto whispered as the Mizukage rubbed her eyes. She looked down at him in surprise, her foam green eyes flicking from him to the door, and back again before realization dawned on her. "Morning, Naruto-kun," she replied quietly, her lips curling in a small smile. "You were sleeping like a log." He shrugged slightly. "Yesterday was pretty long, I'd say. How about you? When did you come in?" he asked. "Sometime around 1 in the morning," Mei replied easily. "I couldn't sleep, I was having nightmares." "Oh?" Naruto muttered, frowning minutely. "Sorry about that." The Mizukage reached over and gently poked his forehead. "It's not like you could have done anything more, Naruto. You survived a sure kill move and supported the forces while we battled. To be honest, I'm just glad you're alive." She leaned over the sleeping sisters, grasping Naruto's chin with her hand, and pressed her lips to his, her fingers gently stroking the skin of his cheek. Naruto returned the gesture, letting the quiet warmth and passion from the kiss flow through him. Mei broke away, sighing in content. "I'm glad too," he replied, getting a smile from the woman. Mei sighed quietly. "I should get going," she whispered grudgingly. "I didn't tell my entourage I was leaving last night. And if they wake up and find me missing, well, there might be an incident. My bodyguards can be stupid sometimes." She packed his lips lightly before carefully extracting herself from the bed. "Make sure to come and see me before I leave, okay?" Mei whispered, sending Naruto a small wink as she went for the door. She stumbled on something, muttering a quiet "sorry" after hearing a muffled ow. Naruto looked down at the woman sleeping on him, sighing quietly. "Well, this will take a while." Someone sat up on the floor next to the bed, rubbing her arm and yawning, shaking her long violet tresses out. Hinata turned to the bed, and her pale eyes lost the glaze of sleep. "Naruto-kun," she yelled, jumping on the bed and immediately waking everyone up. Samui looked up from her spot on Naruto's chest, finding that Hinata had landed on her back in her enthusiasm, trying to push the Hyuga off. Yujito stretched and yawned like a cat, accidentally kicking Hinabi, who had been sleeping on the floor with her sister, in the face. Tenten, startled from the sudden noise and movement, rolled off of the bed with a yelp and Kurenai tightened her grip on Naruto's neck. Or maybe not. Naruto thought dryly. "Good morning." After that eventful awakening, the ladies dispersed back to their rooms to get dressed and ready for the day, leaving Naruto alone. He hadn't packed much in the way of clothes, so he threw on a pair of pants and his leather jacket, buckling on a belt that held a few of his storage scrolls, and his weapon and potion pouches. Naruto made his way to one of the training grounds, passing by several damaged buildings that were being repaired by ninja and civilian alike. A few nodded in his direction, and the proprietor of the stand he went to for breakfast gave him his order free of charge. As he walked through the sparse trees, the dragon man paused mid-chew, his eyebrow rising at the sight of Satsu and L, snoring and leaning against each other on a tree, surrounded by empty bottles of alcohol. Apparently, they had decided to celebrate their victory by getting smashed. Naruto reached out and gently nudged Satsu with his foot, the psychotic woman barely twitching. Shrugging, he continued on to an empty field, the early light of dawn shining through the clouds. Rolling his neck and stretching, Naruto took a deep breath and began his exercises, getting a feel for the limits of his body. Naturally, there were differences. He was a bit faster than before, something that he enjoyed immensely. He was also stronger. Swinging his Daedra bastard sword around was a lot like holding a twig, and the Dawnbreaker weighed about as much as a straw. Luckily, both were basically unbreakable. Sighing and sealing the Dawnbreaker into his hand, Naruto unrolled one of his scrolls, releasing Hersene's bow and a quiver of simple iron arrows. The bow was made from a pair of horns from an old dragon, secured with a grip made of ivory and wrapped with black leather. It sat comfortably in his hand, and while he expected to feel slightly awkward using a weapon made from one of his dead kin, Naruto felt fine handling the bow. Knocking an arrow, he pulled back, and nodded at how smooth the action was. He took aim at a tree but paused, noticing that the iron tip had turned a dark, poisonous green. Slowly releasing the string, the green color faded. The bow must be poison enchanted, Naruto reasoned. That could come in handy someday. Pulling back, he released the shot, arching an eyebrow at the speed with which the arrow zipped across the field, burying itself in the trunk of the tree up the middle of the shaft. Nodding to himself, Naruto ducked and spun, quickly drawing another arrow and firing it as he spun. As he tested himself to see how quickly he could knock and loose an arrow while moving, Naruto remembered just why he had chosen the bow as his favorite weapon. They were unusual in the world of today, most ninja preferring to use kunai, shuriken, and more rarely, senbon. Of the three, shuriken were more for general throwing than the others, and only really skilled practitioners could throw them accurately at a range. Senbon were dangerous for their various applications with poisons and acupuncture points, but were more for short-range throwing. While they are made of metal, they're still light needles and a stiff breeze could easily throw them off target. Kunai were the opposite, generally too heavy to use at a distance and more for close quarters combat. Used by a ninja with enhanced strength and speed, a bow could be fired very fast, and very accurately, and depending on make and the strength of the bow itself, at very long range. Naruto had not wanted to be a ninja like Might Guy or the Raikage, being very obvious presences on the field. He wanted to be more subtle, based more on speed, skill and stealth, than flashy attacks and numerous explosions. Funny how life worked out for him. Naruto spun in place, aiming at the person who had dropped onto the field suddenly, dropping it when he realized who it was. Sensei. He greeted Yugao with a smile. Naruto-kun. She replied, examining the perforated trees around the clearing. I see you've been busy. He shrugged, slinging the bow over his shoulder. Just getting familiar with my body again. I noticed you don't have your bow, sensei. Yugao grimaced, shaking her head. I don't know how to use a bow, so I don't know why that man gave it to me as a gift. Though the werecat form is interesting. He probably would have given you something else if you asked. Naruto pointed out, not many people outside the forest use bows as weapons, but everyone inside did. How's that form working out for you? The Jonin held her hand out and wiggled it. It's interesting, but not as fast as I thought it would be, and I can't use chakra. She shook her head suddenly, snapping her fingers. Right, I came here to get you. The Hokage wants to see all the Genin about promotions. Oh? Naruto hummed, sealing his weapons. Well, lead on, sensei. They hopped into the trees and headed for Kumo proper, passing by the still passed out Satsu and L. They walked through the streets towards the Raikage Tower, noticing the large, somewhat menacing form of Killer Bee in full Biju mode, looking bored while helping rebuild an establishment he had smashed the previous day. Inside the tower, Yugao led Naruto to a large room where the other Genin were waiting with their Jonin sensei, the Hokage sitting behind a desk with his pipe in his mouth. Naruto took up his place next to Samui and Yujito, waiting for the Sandaime to start. Sarutobi looked up from his desk, which contained a few bare bones after action reports. Exhaling a cloud of smoke, he folded his hands on the desk and looked. Good morning. I hope you all had a restful evening after yesterday's events. Now, I am going to call the names of those who have been promoted to Chunin. This is not a responsibility to be taken lightly. As Genin, you have shown power and restraint, skill and creativity, and the ability to work together as a team. As Chunin, you will be able to take higher ranked missions, which means that your life will be harder, your missions more difficult, and in turn, your ability must also rise. He glared at them seriously under the brim of his hat, his brown eyes firm. Make no mistake, wearing the flak jacket is a burden of responsibility and trust. I am trusting you to do your best for Konoha, your comrades and your families, and I ask that you take responsibility for your actions. That being said, if you hear your name, come up and take one of these flak jackets. First up, Suki Uchiha. Suki blinked in surprise, before stepping up and approaching the desk. The Sandaime held a Chunin vest out to her, holding on to it as she grabbed it. Do you understand the responsibility of the station I am promoting you to? He asked quietly. Yes, sir. She replied firmly, her face determined. He nodded and let her step away. Hinata Hyuga, he announced. Upon her approach, he asked the same question, and the normally timid heiress replied with a firm, but quiet yes. Both Tenten and Yujito were given flak jackets as well, and the last name called was Naruto's. Surprised, Naruto stepped forward and took his jacket. The Sandaime sighed and puffed on his pipe, looking over the Genin with disappointed faces. That is not all I've called you here for, he spoke up, gaining surprised looks from Ninja. Since the final exams were cut short and with the invasion taking place, it gave my Jonin a chance to see how you handled yourselves in full combat. With that being the case, I've decided to use this chance for a small experiment. Those of you who showed commendable prowess will be given the rank of probationary Chunin. This means that you will be given the responsibilities of Chunin for a certain period of time, where you will be watched and evaluated. After that period of time is up, I will decide whether you are ready to be Chunin or not. Samui, Hanabi, Ino, Lee, Shino, and Nijiko were given their vests, leaving Sakura, Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba unpromoted. That is all for today. Take the rest of the day off, celebrate you and your comrades' achievements. The Sandaime told them with a kind smile. Ah, Naruto, Samui, Yujito, please, come with me. We are meeting with the Raikage in a few minutes. The trio broke away from their sensei and followed after the old man, Naruto stepping up to speak with him. Hey, Jiji. I have a question. He started. Why did I promote you to Chunin? Hiruzen asked shrewdly, smirking at the look Naruto gave him. Yeah. I mean, honestly, all I did was get stabbed and die. The dragon shinobi said blithely. And come back and turn into a dragon. True, but you also showed great power during the battle. The Sandaime pointed out. You supported the forces, and single-handedly destroyed about a third of the opposition. What would it say, if I didn't promote you up the ranks? That I don't trust you as person. But that I see you as weapon, who is best controlled at the lowest rank. Naruto frowned. So it was entirely political, then? That would not sit well with Naruto at all. No, my boy. Hiruzen denied with a shake of his head. Only partially. I've seen your power, Naruto-kun, and I've seen it grow by leaps and bounds since you've become a ninja. I could have promoted you straight to Jonin and gotten only a few grumbles of favoritism. But that would be unfair to you. Heaping that much responsibility, that fast on someone so young never works out well. Naruto hummed in thought, glancing out of a nearby window. Then why not probationary Chunin? Sarutobi snorted ungracefully. Please, my boy, we both know how that would turn out. It is simply more expedient this way. And to be honest, it means less paperwork on my desk. Nodding in understanding, he paused for a second. Hey, Jiji, why don't you just use shadow clones for your paperwork? He asked, confused. Ah, that old question. Hiruzen muttered, chewing on the stem of his pipe. That would be a good idea except that shadow clones, while physical and mental copies of the user, are not actually alive. They are chakra constructs, and not human beings. Thus, anything they sign in your name is technically a forgery. And in my case, forging the Hokage's signature is a very serious offense that carries heavy penalties, even for me. Though, arriving on the top floor, Mabui waved them inside the office, where they found Ace sitting at his desk, one hand being used to read and fill out reports, the other for lifting a dumbbell twice the size of his head. Looking up, I set the dumbbell aside and motioned for the others to take a seat. I'm going to start this off by saying thank you, simply because I want to get it out of the way. I said easily, folding his hands on his desk. Without Konoha and our allies, Kumo would have sustained far more damage than it has. In fact, he flipped over a document, scanning the contents. Most of the collateral damage was caused by my idiot brother B and his lack of restraint. We only lost about 2% of our fighting force, and almost of all of them have non-critical injuries, while the enemy was completely eliminated. I shifted in his seat to stare at Naruto. That is, for the most part, due to you. The violent changing of forms and the presence of a dragon in open combat definitely threw them off, not to mention all the fire and shit you were breathing on them. He sighed lightly, sucking his teeth. For that, and the fact that you didn't die and make my daughters miserable, you have my gratitude, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto nodded respectfully in return. Thank you. I still hate you for having sex with my daughters, eventually. That's reasonable. The dragon man agreed blithely. Dad. Yujito shouted, mortified, while Samui's face slowly turned red from embarrassment. Speaking of you defiling my legacy, I continued as if he hadn't heard them, your wedding. I sent for the Thunder Priests the day you arrived in my village, and they should be here in about 2 days or so. I have opened a line of credit in your names at the finest tailor in town, and the rest of the preparations are being handled as we speak. Both of the girls perked up at the mention of the wedding, their faces thoughtful. We'll need to coordinate. Samui told Yujito seriously. We should do that now. Right? Yujito agreed, standing up and making to leave with her sister. Are you coming, Naruto-kun? Naruto shook his head, gesturing at the Sandaime. I need to talk to Hokage-sama, but I'll catch up with you in a bit. He replied, holding the door open for the older man. The two blondes followed behind, but before the door closed, Samui stuck her head back in the room. Hey dad, when you said eventually, you should have said again. She said, a smile on her face. A's face twisted in confusion. Again instead of eventually. He pondered for a minute, before realization hit him in the face like his iron claw. What? Hiruzen and Naruto glanced at each other in question as Samui and Yujito raced past them, giggling, as the thunderous shout echoed through the village. Perhaps we should hurry, my boy. he said wisely, picking up the pace and exiting the tower at a swift jog. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Naruto scratched the back of his neck sheepishly. Well, it just occurred to me, when A was talking about the wedding, I don't really have any guy friends. I mean, I have Hayate, but he's in Konoha. There's Kakashi, but he wouldn't show up until the reception, to flirt with the ladies and eat cake. Shikamaru and Choji aren't really my friends, we've just hung out a couple of times. Kiba is really ornery around me. And I can't ask you to be best man, Jij. He rolled his eyes up at the clouds and thought. That's like, reverse nepotism, I think. Hiruzen chuckled as they slowed to a walk, retrieving his pipe from his robes and preparing it. You're thinking too politically about it, my boy. Of course I could be your best man, Naruto, I have been before. When my son, Konohamaru's father, retired and married his wife, I was his best man. Of course, he is antisocial and, had Asuma been there, he would have asked him. So, is it a yes, Gigi? Naruto asked, his face questioning. Yes, Naruto, I would be honored to be your best man at your wedding. The Sandaime replied with a warm smile. And if you see me crying at all, it is definitely because I have something in my eye. Whatever you say, old man, whatever you say. Hiruzen laughed quietly, before grunting in discomfort and rolling his shoulder. Ah, what happened? The Jinchuriki asked in concern. Are you hurt? The Sandaime sighed unhappily, his gnarled fingers digging into the muscles of his shoulder. Old age is catching up to me, my boy. He replied, sounding disappointed. Yesterday, I backhanded some young punk who decided to take a shot at me, and I pulled a muscle. Oh? Naruto said, reaching over and grasping the older man's arm, the soft golden glow of a healing spell traveling down his arm to the Sandaime, who sighed in relief as the chimes faded. Thank you, my boy. Hiruzen nodded gratefully, stretching his arm. I fear I won't be your Hokage much longer, Naruto-kun. Even I, with all my knowledge and experience, can't fight time. It's almost time for me to pass the hat on once again. To whom, though? The Dragon Man asked. The Sandaime shrugged. I don't know, I haven't thought about it yet. Jiraiya would never go for it, and the less said about Orochimaru, the better. None of the Jonin are in the right place either. That only leaves one person I can see becoming a good Hokage. You mean your other student? Naruto questioned. The one who walked out on Konoha. She's not perfect, but then again, no one is. The Hokage admitted. She is powerful, shrewd and skilled. And it's not as if I would just toss the hat at her when she comes back. I would show her how to run Konoha well. Naruto shrugged. You're the Hokage. If you think it's best. There will be plenty of time for me to refine my idea, Naruto-kun. Hiruzen replied, opening the door to the tailor's shop, the sign above reading Uchiha's high fashion studio. However, that's not what we're here for, is it? Let's get you suited up. Some time later, Naruto found himself standing on a short podium, 3 mirrors positioned around him, as a middle-aged woman with ebony skin and dirty blonde hair took his measurements. That was the proprietor of the shop, Uchiha, a friendly woman with laugh lines and an easy smile. There we go, Naruto-sama, Uchiha said, standing up and writing numbers on her small notepad. I have your measurements, and will begin working on your suit. I would also like to remind you that I don't do traditional kimono. If you want that sort of thing, there are other shops. No, a suit is perfectly fine, thank you Uchiha-san. Naruto replied with a smile. She returned the gesture, turning to leave the room. There are seats in the main area if you wish to wait, and your fiancés are in the other rooms if you wish to speak with them. Naruto stepped off of the podium, pulling his pants and jacket back on, quietly padding from the room. Approaching another room, he knocked on the door. Come in. Samui's voice called from within, and he entered to find her standing in a similar position he had occupied, stripped down to her underwear while another woman, who bore a familial resemblance to Uchiha, had her measuring tape out and was taking notes. Hey, Naruto-kun. He smiled at the blonde Kunoichi, looking at her through the mirror. Having fun, Samui? He asked teasingly. She snorted quietly, scowling as the other girl poked her in the side with her pencil for moving. I feel like a doll, she grumbled as the door opened, admitting the form of Suki, carrying a pair of large cups in her arms. Oh, hi Naruto-kun. She greeted him with a smile, setting the cups aside and wrapping her arms around him in tight hug. How are you feeling? He kissed her cheek and returned the hug. Better than I did yesterday, that's for sure. What about you, Suki? Did you sleep well? The Uchiha heir shrugged, stepping back and smiling at the frustrated look on Samui's face. Not too bad, though I'm a little sore. Hey, Samui, I got those drinks you wanted. She held one of the cups up and swirled it around. Samui perked up in interest and made to turn around, but the tailor's assistant cleared her throat loudly and tugged on the measuring tape around her waist. Don't move. Curious, Naruto peeked over the rim of the cup, finding the contents to be what looked like colored, sweet-smelling snow. What is this? He asked Suki, who was sipping her drink from a straw. She licked her lips and held it out to Naruto. It's a kumo treat made from snow or crushed ice mixed with fruit juice. Samui called it a slushie. It's really good, you should try it. The dragon man nodded and took a pull from the straw. Hot, it's pretty good. Kinda sweet though. Yes, I know, Samui said impatiently, the muscles in her back and legs tense, as if she wanted to throw the tailor away from her and run at them. It's my favorite treat, and are we done yet, Mayu-san? The last question was directed at the woman taking her measurements, who gave the impatient blonde a stern look. Not yet, Samui-san. I still need to measure your bust, so please remove your bra. Samui grunted in displeasure, reaching behind her, and unsnapping her bra strap, flicking it away, and holding her arms out, giving the cup in Naruto's hand a longing look. Chuckling quietly and taking pity on his fiancée, Naruto stepped around the podium, and held the straw up to her lips. Here. Sucking her treat through the emergency induction port, Samui moaned in pleasure as the taste hit her tongue, getting a few awkward looks from the other people in the room, which turned into restrained humor, when she suddenly clutched at her head, muttering, "Ah." Brain freeze. Mayu tugged sharply on her measuring tape. Stay still. Naruto stepped back, and let the tailor finish up as she flashed him a stern look. Sorry. She huffed in frustration, and scribbled a quick note on her pad. I'm going to get some test dresses, Samui-san, I'll be right back. Samui snatched her cup back as the tailor left, sighing in relief. Thanks, Suki. I've missed having these, she said with a small smile. What, you can't get them in Konoha? Naruto asked in confusion, getting a shrug from Samui. They're just not the same, she replied, turning a thoughtful look at him. She took a deep draw on her straw, before reaching forward and grasping the back of his head, pulling him and laying a passionate kiss on his lips. Her tongue slipped into his mouth, letting her trade a bit of her treat with him, drawing back. It's pretty good, right? Naruto nodded, licking his lips. Oranges? He asked, getting a nod from Samui, who stuck her tongue out at him, showing the orange tint it gained. The door opened up as Maya stepped into the room, carrying a bundle of white cloth over her shoulder. I'm back, she announced, dumping her load on the podium. Time to put the drink down. Samui said childishly, sucking on the straw while giving the tailor a harsh glare. Well, I'm going to find Yujido, and see how she's doing, Naruto said, stepping back as Suki kicked her feet up, watching the proceedings with a smirk. Don't give her too much trouble, Samui-chan. He found the other room and knocked before entering, finding Yujido standing on a podium with another assistant and Hinata standing around her, holding different dresses up and comparing them. See, with this one, the way the cloth is folded, symbolizes her complicated life. Weddings are all about symbolism. The assistant, a younger woman with brunette hair and darkly tanned skin said, waving her dress about. Yes, but ninja wear symbols all the time. Hinata argued back, her tone surprisingly passionate. This one is simple but elegant, perfect for showing how straightforward Yujido is. Plus, all that folded cloth is heavy. Yeah, Yujido added with a smirk, watching the other ladies go at each other. I wouldn't be able to fight in that thing. The assistant stepped back, looking aghast. Why would you want to fight at your wedding? She gasped. The blonde Jinchuriki spotted Naruto in the mirrors, surreptitiously slipping away from the arguing women and approaching him. Hey, Naruto. She smiled up at him, before pushing him into one of the seats and sitting on his lap. Did you get your suit yet? Not yet, Uchiha-sen is working on it right now, he replied, leaning down and gently kissing her. How long have these two been at it? Yujido chuckled quietly as Hinata waved the dress in her hands in the other woman's face, her cheeks red with indignation, as she explained just why any clothing used by ninja shouldn't cut down on agility. About 10 minutes or so. I already picked out the perfect dress, but this is too funny to stop. Because we could be attacked at any time, Mayuri-san. Hinata exclaimed, and if we can't defend ourselves, because our clothes weigh us down, we could die. In a very embarrassing way too. Mayuri's face twisted in confusion, her arms dropping. But it's a wedding. The only embarrassment that should be felt at a wedding is if your uncle gets drunk and a little frisky with bridesmaids. And I really couldn't hide in any weapons in such a tight dress, Hinata. Yujido added, snickering as the argument built up again. It's like watching a bonfire. Naruto chuckled, stroking Yujido's back as they sat and watched. The door opened slowly, Uchiha's kind face peeking through the crack. Naruto-sama, I need you back in the room for the details of your suit. Nodding, he kissed Yujido once more and left the room, following the tailor back to his room, where Hiruzen had fallen asleep in his chair, the ashes from his pipe spilling down the front of his robe. Uchiha saw this, and, smirking mischievously, slammed the door loudly. The Sandaime jumped up, hurling the hat off of his head, and making him stumble on his robe. Grumbling at the tinkling laughter coming from the tailor, Hiruzen turned a glare on the woman. It's not polite to make fun of the elderly, you know. Whatever you say, Hokage-sama, Uchiha replied with nonchalant wave. Naruto stepped back up on the podium after stripping out of his clothes and pulling on the pants provided. Uchiha knelt at his feet, using various pins from a cushion to get the information she needed. So, Naruto-sama, what color do you want your suit to be? Aren't they always black? He asked in confusion, not that wearing black was a problem for him. Typically, yes, but they don't have to be, she replied easily. Darker colors are fine, but lighter colors like pink are generally frowned upon. Naruto stroked his chin in thought. What do you think, father? You're seriously asking me if you should wear a color other than black? Alduin replied incredulously. Black is the best color ever. And I'm not saying that because my scales are black. Yes you are. The Kyuubi huffed. Red is the best color. I mean, look at me. Have you ever seen such magnificent coloring anywhere else? No, of course not. As the strongest Biju, I am, of course, the best looking. Oh shut up, you giant Thorog. The world leader grumbled, resting his scaly chin on his talons. What would you know about clothes? You're a fox. And you're a flying purse. She shot back. What would you know about clothes, oh scaly one? I think you would look just fine naked. Ember said honestly, from her corner of his mind. Well, I'm not getting any help from them. Naruto thought dryly as the two massively powerful beings in his head argued, looking down at Jiha. I'll go with a black suit, with a red tie. I know ninja don't like to wear things like ties, the tailor replied. Something about having something around their neck all the time makes them feel nervous, which I can understand, from a certain point of view. To that end, I have clip-on ties. Thanks for not insisting I wear one. Naruto said gratefully. I get the feeling your assistant would've. Mayuri is nice girl, but she has her head in the clouds, Uchiha replied with a fond shake of her head. She doesn't get how paranoid ninja are all the time. She'll learn, though. After about an hour of trying on pants, jackets, vests and shoes, Naruto's outfit was eventually settled on. Standing on the podium and checking himself from every angle, Naruto liked the look of his suit. It wasn't shiny nor particularly wealthy looking, but it was comfortable, easy to move around in, and made him cut a fine figure. You clean up nicely, my boy. Hiruzen commented, reaching up and straightening his collar. I do damn good work. Uchiha agreed, folding up her materials. I'll take care of it until the day of the wedding, just make sure to hand it back to me when you're done admiring yourself. Her eyes flashed with mischief, and Naruto yelped in surprise when she pinched his butt cheek. Gotcha. The Sandaime chuckled as the Dragon Chunin gave the tailor a strange look. He looked back as the door opened and Tenten entered. Hey Naruto-kun, I wanted to talk to Sandaime-sama. She stepped back in surprise before bowing. I'm sorry for intruding. It's alright, Tenten, I need to see the tailor about something anyway. Hiruzen replied kindly, stepping out of the room. Naruto faced his childhood friend who was blushing in embarrassment. Hey Tenten. How do I look? He asked, taking a business pose. She smiled, her eyes scanning his form. You look handsome, Naruto. Like you're about to get married. Her face fell, and her shoulders slumped in depression. What's wrong? Naruto asked worriedly, reaching out and taking her hand. She stepped forward and rested her head on his chest. Tenten. She mumbled, I wanted to be your first. What do you mean? Tenten looked up at him with red eyes. You were my first friend. I wanted to share everything with you, our first kiss, our first date, our first time. She blushed slightly. But we didn't, and I just feel like we aren't that close anymore. We used to share everything, but now. I'm not even your first wife. Naruto looked down, gently rubbing away a tear slowly streaking down her cheek. This is really important to you. It is, she stated firmly. When we were in the orphanage, you were all I had, and now there's all these women in your life, and I just feel like I'm slowly getting lost in the crowd. The guilt building in his chest felt like a brick. Naruto hugged her tightly. I'll never forget about you, Tenten. You will always be important to me. She didn't reply, only hugging him harder, burying her face in his chest. Naruto bit his lip in thought, before snapping his fingers. Tenten, I have an idea. 2 days later, the Konoha ninja were gathered in the temple for the wedding, shifting nervously in their seats. They took up one side of the room, with Kumo, Kiri, and Suna ninja taking up the other. At the front of the room, there stood an old man, his beard long, and his head bald, wearing a set of ceremonial blue and white robes. That was Raito, the head thunder priest. Soft music, flutes and harps, began to play as the doors opened. Everyone stood as Naruto walked down the aisle, cutting an impressive figure with the Sandaime Hokage on his right and Yugao on his left. Her typical Jonin attire switched out for a modest purple kimono. As he walked, Naruto met Tenten's eyes, a soft smile pulling at his lips as she waved shyly at him. Stepping up to priest, Naruto nodded respectfully to the man as Hiruzen and Yugao took up their places behind him. He nervously fiddled with his ring, trying to refrain from looking as nervous as he felt. A few minutes later, the music picked up a little, and every eye turned towards the back. Stepping through the door was his robe closed to hide his muscles, and a boar-faced belt buckle. This day was about his daughters. And most people would focus on the man who looked like he could crush a melon by flexing his abs. Soft gasps rang through the room as Yujito and Samui stepped beside their father. Samui's dress was surprisingly modest, hinting at her cleavage and hips, while bearing a little skin around her neck and shoulders, her pale blonde hair tied into a small but intricate bun with a small crown of lilies adorning her head, holding the veil. Their dress itself was pure white like snow, with subtle, ice blue lines on the cloth that resembled a spider's web. Her cheeks were pink, with light mascara to bring out the blue of her eyes with light red lipstick. Yujito, conversely, wore a dress that hugged her athletic figure to her hips, flaring out near to bottom of her thighs, and wore a lower neckline that bared an enticing view of her breasts that wasn't impertinent. It was strapless, bearing the skin of her shoulders, and had what looked like small diamonds dotting the cloth over her stomach. Her hair, usually in a long ponytail, had been braided with small daisies, the small veil not hiding the warm smile on her face. The light makeup applied enhancing the feline quality of her aqua eyes. Naruto's eyes constantly flicked between the two, unable to focus on either. Their dresses represented what they were, beautiful, but in entirely different ways. A smirked at the gobsmacked expression on Naruto's face, but his face fell as they approached the dais, every step closer to giving his girls away forever. Part of him wanted to stop, to call the whole thing off and shelter his girls from the world, but as much as he wanted to, he wouldn't. Samui and Yujito, his daughters, they loved the man waiting for them, and by the interactions they had, he loved them just as much. Hiding them away wouldn't give them happiness, but Naruto would. So, heaving a heavy internal sigh, I stepped up to Dias, smiling as the girls kissed his cheek. Meeting Naruto's red eyes, he nodded slightly, holding out their hands to him. Naruto returned the gesture respectfully, his eyes immediately fixing on the angels in front of him. As the Thunder Priest stepped up and began to speak, his voice low and rumbling like his namesake, Tenten found that she couldn't focus on them, her mind falling back 2 days before. After Naruto finished explaining his idea to Samui and Yujito, he left his suit with a Jiha and took Tenten's hand, leading her to the edge of Kumo's mountain. Stepping over the rail, he held Tenten close and looked deep into her chocolate brown eyes. "Do you trust me, Tenten?" "Of course I do," she replied quickly, still confused as to what his idea was, becoming even more so when Naruto took his jacket off and put it around her shoulders. "Hold on," he warned her quietly, before hugging her to him and letting them drop off of the side. Tenten blinked as the Sandaime Hokage stepped up and presented a trio of simple golden bands. "Do you, Naruto Uzumaki, swear to protect and fight by this woman's side through the storms and clear skies?" Naruto took the ring and slid it onto Samui's ring finger, sealing his promise with a soft whisper. "I do." Tenten screamed in surprise as they fell, closing her eyes and clutching Naruto to herself. She only opened her eyes when loud thuds reached her ears, peeking out of Naruto's jacket to find them flying through air, draconic wings emerging from his pack, beating the air. "Naruto." "Sorry, Tenten," he replied with a smile, angling them down through the clouds. Emerging from the bottom, Tenten spotted a small trading village in a valley. "Is that where we're going?" she asked, pointing at the collection of small houses and shops. "Yes, it is." "And do you, Samui, swear to protect and fight by this man's side through the storms and clear skies?" Samui's voice was quiet, but still managed to ring through the hull. "I do." Tenten found herself standing outside of the shop Naruto had entered, his leather jacket hanging around her shoulders, feeling more than a little lost. Naruto emerged a minute later, stuffing something into his pocket and taking Tenten's hand, leading her into the copse of trees, stopping in a small clearing. "Tenten, you were my first friend. You protected me in the orphanage, you stayed with me when the other kids left, even when your father came back. I have always admired your determination and kindness. What I'm saying, Tenten, is that I love you." He knelt, withdrawing at the time he had purchased earlier, holding it up to her view. It was ring. Naruto knelt in front of her, presenting the ring to her. "Tenten, will you marry me?" She couldn't help herself, she gasped in shock. "Naruto, I..." Her thoughts went to the 2 blondes in Kumo. "What about Samui and Yujito?" "I explained it to them," he replied calmly. "They understood." "Yes, Naruto." The words spilled from her lips, grasping his hand and pulling him to her. "I will marry you. I love you too." They kissed in the clearing, the sunlight streaming down around them, the peaceful sounds of nature joining in a chorus as the love between the two swelled in their hearts. Tenten eventually pulled back, unable to stop herself from smiling. "Why did you bring me out here, Naruto?" she wondered aloud. "Well, if we walked a couple of minutes that way," he pointed south, further into the trees. "There's a small temple, with a priest who can perform marriages." "Perform? You want to marry me now?" she asked in surprise, feeling touched. "Right now?" "Well, not if you don't want to," Naruto replied gently. "There's always tomorrow." Taking a deep, bracing breath, Tenten shook her head. "Let's go." Naruto led her into the forest, quickly coming upon the temple. An old man was standing outside of the simple wooden building, sweeping the steps. He looked up at them in surprise. "Can I help you?" Tenten smiled to herself as Naruto and Yujito were asked a question, playing with the ring on her finger underneath her gloves. After the priest had performed the ceremony and Naruto and Tenten were declared married, he had set up a large tent declaring he had proposed, where they ate and drank. And finally, under the full moon shining down on them, with fireflies gently blinking around the trees, they had consummated their marriage. She looked up as Naruto said the final "I do." The Thunder Priest, his craggy face breaking into a bright grin, said, "Then, by the power of the clouds, the thunder and the lightning, I now pronounce you man and wife, man and wife." Naruto kissed Samui first, as she was the eldest by a month, the blonde Kunoichi throwing her arms around his neck, her veil fluttering to the floor. When they separated, Yujiro stepped in and took her place, her hands threading through his hair. As they separated, the crowd came to their feet, clapping and cheering, with barely any dry eyes. Even Zabuza was teary, though trying to hide it with his hit eye. Naruto proffered his arms to his wives, and they walked down the aisle as husband and wife. Melodic music was playing as the dance floor was crowded, those who'd rather not picking at the buffet table at the other end of hall. Naruto danced with Samui first, slowly stepping and twirling along the wooden floor, looking at nothing but each other. Then A had cut in and Yujiro slid into his arms as the music picked up, and more people stepped out onto the dance floor. He had been passed around from Hinata to Hanabi, Shino, and Kurenai, to Haku and Suki, Ino, and Sakura, Garin, and Tamari, Nijiko, and Tenten, even his sensei Yugao and Mabi, finally ending up spinning with Mei as Yujiro danced with Hinata and Hiruzen took a spin with Samui. "You sure know how to make a girl jealous, Naruto-kun," she said with a teasing smirk, enjoying the closeness between their bodies. Dressing up all finely, looking so handsome standing at the dais. "It wasn't my intent to make anyone jealous," Naruto replied, feeling a little worried. It was inevitable, with all the women he was involved with. "You can be clueless sometimes," Mei muttered with a shake of her head. "We'll be leaving tonight, going back to Kiri. When you have some free time, come down and visit me, okay Naruto-kun?" "I will, Mei," he replied. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his cheek, sending him a flirty wink over her shoulder as she left. "Don't make me wait too long." Sighing and feeling a little exhausted, Naruto turned to find his wives, finding them looking like he felt. Approaching them, he cut into Yujiro's dance with Yugao and Samui's dance with Nijiko. "I think it's time we left," he said, smiling at them. They took his arms and began to walk to the doors, waving to their friends and family. I watched them leave the building with a melancholy expression, quietly sighing and quaffing his drink. "Another, please." There wasn't a long walk to their hotel, and it was late at night, so there weren't many people about. Those that were gave the trio respectful nods and plenty of space. As they walked up the steps to their room, Naruto glanced at the blondes. "So, not to sound awkward, but who's going first?" "Samui," Yujiro answered easily. "She is the eldest of us, though definitely not the prettiest. That right is reserved for me." She finished her teasing statement with silly flip of her hair, unable to contain her laughter. At the door, Naruto paused. So I'm supposed to carry someone?" he asked nervously, opening the door. Samui answered his question by jumping at him, wrapping her arms and legs around him, pushing him back into the room. Yujiro laughed quietly, pulling her hair from its braid, and letting the daisies cascade onto the floor, following them in and closing the door behind her. A few seconds later, the door reopened a bit, letting Naruto's hand slip out and feel around the doorknob, eventually landing on the hanging sign, and flipping it over to Do Not Disturb. The door was quickly shut, followed by the click of the lock. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.